Hello and welcome to Stardust. Today, Dino Tanasi and I will be talking to Paul Bolger about his upcoming graphic novel, Hound, by Dark Horse. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Stardust.
Hello everyone, thank you for sticking around. It's Robbie here. Today, Dino Tanasi and I are talking to a filmmaker, musician, and cartoonist about his massive graphic novel being released on March 9 by Dark Horse. With you, Mr. Paul Bolger. Hey Paul, how are you doing?
How's it going? I'm good. You?
Great to have you here. We are doing fantastic. Very excited to chat with you.
Yeah.
Nice to see you, Paul.
Yeah, Dino, how's it going?
Very good, very good. It's we've been Robbie and I are excited, obviously, to be chatting with you and introduce, I guess, our audience to your work, to you, the man behind the book, the Hound. And I understand Dark Horse are actually sort of in collaboration with you now, and you're actually putting all three books out as one big graphic novel. Is that correct?
But we ran a few Kickstarter campaigns over a couple of years, and we produced a 3-volume set. And my idea was always to do it as one book, but we couldn't do it back then. And then, as luck would have it, an introduction that came out of nowhere gave, because we were going to make our own edition. Actually, we were looking to raise finance to do a collected 500-page big book, we were only going to do a limited edition print again, and then Dark Horse heard about it and took it, and now they're doing a worldwide edition, exactly, even better than I would have imagined.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
nice.
I still can't believe it. I think somebody's going to wake me up.
When Paul and I were first actually met face to face, and we collaborated on a film that Paul was directing, Happily Never After, which was a fully CGI movie. In fact, it was one of the first movies that where we were subcontracting, other studios to help on a CG movie, because
and that was out of necessity at the time, because we couldn't do it on one place under one roof.
Yeah, but I mean, amongst the mammoth, the task that Paul had directing this movie, he was planning the graphic novel, The Hound, even back then. And had I said to Paul then, hey, what if Dark Horse was to pick up your car? It would have been like, it would have seemed like a pipe dream. I mean, because Dark Horse is extremely well respected in the graphic comic community and graphic novels. So kudos to you, Paul, and well deserved as well, because your work is beautiful. So very, very happy for you.
Paul, just before we take a deep dive into talking about Hound, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and some of the works you have done? I know you started as a trainee in animation, right?
Yeah, I did. Well, like a lot of people back in Ireland in the 80s, there wasn't much going on. I left college. I did graphic design in college, and I never worked in that. Never really wanted to work in that. I always wanted to do comics and music, and animation I didn't know anything about. And the Don Bluth studios opened up in Dublin, making, I think they were finishing off American Tail, and they were looking for people to work in the studio. And a friend of mine saw it on TV. They were on some TV program talking about it. So we applied and we got into Don Bluth, for a couple of years. And I got my basic training, I suppose, there on In-Betweening and then into animation on All Dogs Go to Heaven, the first one, and Land Before Time. And then I could rattle off my CV, but I'd bore the life out of you. But basically after that, I ended up in Germany, went to work for Richard Williams on The Thief and the Cobbler in London. Came home here in the early 90s, worked for Ralph Bakshi on Cool World. Then I set up a studio in Dublin, which we did a German movie called Felidae, which was like an adult 2D animated feature, which I directed the animation on the Irish side, and I designed the characters for. And there was a bunch of other stuff. And then I kind of slipped back into music in the mid-90s. I closed the studio. And ever since then, I've been kind of meandering in and out of different things. In a bit of music and animation, I've been a lot involved. And then I did that movie with Dino. We met in Germany then, probably 2005, 4, 5?
Yeah.
No, earlier probably. And that got done. And then I moved home here about 15 years ago with the idea of trying to do my own stuff, whatever that stuff would be.
So, Paul, what can you tell us about Hound?
It's a long story, literally. So the story is based on an old Irish legend, right? This story, they think, was first written down probably in the 8th century, maybe the 7th century. It's a strange story because it's pre-Christian, which means it comes from a period in Irish history which is a very different culture. It's Iron Age, probably around the time of Julius Caesar, really, maybe even earlier. The Christian monks who wrote it down in the Dark Ages, if you want to call them that, although Ireland didn't really suffer from the Dark Ages, Europe was in Dark Ages, but Ireland wasn't. A lot of the monks were obviously Christian, and they would have written down the story with a flavor or a Christian kind of a vibe. So they were trying to make it fit in with the Bible, and they were trying to make it fit with the world that they wanted to create. But they couldn't do it because the story is so strange. And there's no really good character, no really bad character. So the idea is that this guy, this boy is born, his father is the sun god, which is Lu of the long hand. And he wasn't a god, because Irish legends or Irish culture is a bit different. It's more animistic. They weren't really, they kind of ancestor worship. It was more like Eastern religions. It's not like Western religion, right? So they would have, and even worship is the wrong word, they would have always looked to their ancestors for their guidance. So an ancestor of Cuchulain's people, of the heroes' people, was the father, right? So basically he grew up half kind of immortal or something, you know? And in the end anyway, the story is that he makes when he's 7, he kills the dog of a blacksmith, who's this huge, fearsome dog that protects the blacksmith's forge. And when he kills the dog, they come out and they find the dog dead. They see the kid, and somebody says, or he said to the owner, who's upset, he said, "Well, I'll be your dog." And the owner says, "What are you talking about? You're a child." "Well, I just killed your dog. I didn't mean to, you know." And everybody's looking at this tiny little kid and they're thinking, "Holy crap, he killed this, and the dog is a monster," you know. So the idea is then that he is now the new Hound, because he said he would. So he protects the forge from the age of 7 to 17. And he becomes Coo, which is the Irish for hound. And people kept saying to me, "Oh, but they'll never be able to say Irish names. The Irish names are too hard to say." And Irish as a language, or Gaelic as a language, has a different way of spelling than English, right? So you have to understand how the letters work to be able to pronounce the names. So I just wrote them phonetically.
So how did you come up with this idea?
Well, I tell you very simply, it goes back a long, long time. I was working in Dunbluth. That's how long ago it was. And I was asking my friend a question: how come we don't have any Irish stories made into movies like this, like animation, you know? And we just couldn't, you just couldn't, unless they were kind of Disney-fied, which is nothing wrong with that. But I felt this story was too dark and too odd and weird, and too mature in a way, too adult for a kind of a silly cartoon.
You know, Paul? Yeah, Paul. Sorry to interrupt. One thing I remember, because obviously I felt I was there at the beginning stages, at least at the birth of the graphic novel, working alongside you. And at the time, we were both, and we still are, you know, huge fans of Mignola's work, Mike Mignola and Hellboy. Yeah. And, you know, when you look at the book and the artwork, I mean, you've definitely got your own style, but if it was to be compared with anyone's work, definitely it has that sensibility, or that kind of the meat and potato of what Mignola has in his artwork. You know, the sense of color, the sense of how you design the pages in a way to kind of lead the reader to appreciate the almost the way that pictorially you're telling the story.
Yeah, well, my idea was that could I tell it without any words?
Because obviously making a transition from animation or animation director or director to comic book artists, a graphic novel artist, how much were you influenced by animation and storytelling versus what you kind of maybe grew up with in terms of reading graphic novels?
It's a good question, because, you know, the book, the concept, I suppose, has gone through a lot of different approaches over the years, and that helped, because that means I was able to work out a lot of the design, like how you would look in the world and how they dressed and all that kind of stuff. And then, you know, use of color or no color, and the idea of what you're saying about Mike Mignola. But for me, the real influence, and maybe, yeah, I like what that guy does. I always did. He's brilliant. But I love Caravaggio and Rembrandt, you know, and I like,
exactly. Yeah.
and I like chiaroscuro, and I like the idea of light and dark. And then I also like the idea that I learned from Dean Taylor, who's another good friend of ours.
Yeah, amazing artist, Dean. Yeah,
brilliant. He was the art director on Nightmare Before Christmas, and Dean has an amazing sensibility with dark and light. And sometimes it's theatrical, and he breaks the rules, you know. And it was amazing. Like, you let the story drives everything. So for me, I was thinking, okay, what's most important here is the story, right? Whether it's animation, live action, or a graphic novel. But there are three different approaches to telling a story. So the first thing I decided was the lighting at first glance looks real, but it's not. If you look at it, it's theatrical. Each page or each shot is lit as it needs to be.
Yeah.
To get the moment across. So the continuity, if you were to really tear it apart, you could, because it's not there. The sun could be above in one page, and then it's setting in the next page. But the great thing about going in black and white, and what I like about what Mike Mignola does, and other artists that I admire too, like there's a couple of Italian guys like Hugo Pratt, Corto Maltese, and you know, people like that they would have big black shapes, you know, they weren't afraid to not draw in every detail. So again, everything served the story. So what I decided to do was I almost did what we would call a beat board, which is not a storyboard, but I would do the main beats of a story, like for a movie. But I had to do it in vertical format. I couldn't do it as a timeline. I couldn't do it like one after the other. So how do you make the pages interesting? How do you make the eye flow and all that kind of stuff?
What I've always found with your work is there's a huge amount of theory, logic, and sense in everything that you do, from the music to the direction to the actual art itself. So in other words, you do the groundwork, the research, and even down to the costumes in the book, they're authentic, you know, and the weapons. I remember, you know, having chats with you where, no, it has to be right, you know, I've got to get the right kind of
well, there was a kind of an idea that I had. See, we think we know what the European Celts, and that's another term that you could argue applies to Ireland or not. But anyway, the European mainland, right? The Celtic people, as they're called by the Greeks and the Romans, you could argue that we kind of knew what they looked like, because they would have been statues made, or the Romans made records. But the Romans never came here really until the time of, they were here, but they hadn't made a huge impact. So who knows how many Irish people, or the Celtic Irish people, were living in Britain or in Europe at the time. There is some evidence they were. So I decided to have a bit of fun with that, because we don't really know how they looked, right? I kind of had this idea that, like, we have 4 provinces in Ireland. We have 4 divisions, right? 4 quarters. So I decided that, and we used to have 5, but that's gone. So the north, the south, the east, and the west. And I decided that each of those places were like countries like Scotland, Wales, and England are the United Kingdom. I sort of decided that north, south, east, and west, Connacht, Ulster, Niall, Munster, and Leinster would be 4 countries on this island. And each of them would kind of look a bit different for different reasons. So I made up all this mad shit about why is that? Okay, people in the west, they're the descendants of the Ice Age people, so they're slightly Stone Age. They have these weapons. People over here are this, you know, and all of those choices, then that's where the consistency comes from, because the weapons of the people in the West are from their culture. The people in the East are more like the British Celts or the European. And it's exactly what you're talking about. And that's all that craziness I was doing back then. Do you remember I was going to buy...
I remember the massive research you were doing. And
one of the things with that research, I think, was that the first real reason I wanted to do the book, actually, even way back, was to try and help teach kids the Irish language. Okay? And I thought comic books would be interesting. Now it's been done. People are doing it now since. And in fact, there is an Irish language edition out. We picked up by a publisher, which is amazing. But just to finish though, what I was really trying to do, I don't know about being the definitive version, because I think purists could argue with me that I've changed it too much. But every version is valid. But my feeling was that if I could do with Barry Devlin, who wrote the thing with me, he wrote the screenplay, and then I took certain parts of the screenplay and used them in the book, was to just, if you've never heard of it, hopefully you'll enjoy it. if you are from Ireland, it might make you read where it came from.
Yeah.
So, and it just so happens that I managed to hit on a few things that kind of look a bit cool.
I'm very flattered many times, Robbie, because often Paul is experimenting or trying something new, and he'll send me some art and go, what do you think? I'm trying. And
yeah. Well, I think I used to drive you crazy. That's
no. Are you kidding? No, and Robbie, honestly, he'd send me not just one or two versions, but quite a few different versions, and each one of them is fantastic. But you could see the way Paul's mind works. He's forever pushing to get an exact idea across, and so designing it, creating beautiful artwork, and also the choice of color. I remember right at the beginning, Paul, when you were even sort of and you got me sort of buying it as well. We got the boards, the special boards to draw comics on, right? The special.
Oh yeah, the panels
and the exact measurements, And then Paul was like, "Wow, do I work on the boards or do I work in the computer?" And it was incredible. Because again, it's just for me being sort of exposed to that brain of Paul's, creative brain that's working away, trying to find the best way to produce something, So and I would imagine,
I mean, yeah, well, listen, that 20 quid is in the post, thanks.
No, but you're the same. The funny thing, Paul, you're exactly the same with the music as well. You'll do a bit of music. You might, on occasion send me the QuickTime or the link, and I'll listen to it, and it sounds completed and finished and probably out there, wherever you sort of distribute.
But there's a thing that I told myself, that if at this stage in my life, which I'm not getting any younger, anything I do, I want to arrive fully formed. In fact, I should open a studio and call it Fully Formed Productions, because I think it's the world has changed so much in the last 15 to 20 years, where, years ago you could, if you were doing music, for example, you could do a demo of a few songs and send it to a record company and it might get picked up. Nowadays, you almost have to finish the bloody album. And the good thing, though, by finishing Hound was, and I think that's now in fairness,
could change it. Yeah, no one.
Well, not only that, you see, but they could have. Dark Horse could have said to me, "We want this, but you're going to have to do these 5 things for us to take it, right?" And they didn't. They didn't change one.
Yeah,
nothing. They didn't change anything. Yeah. Like not even the spellings. Like we spell in Ireland and England, and I think
color
and honor. We don't have we have the U, color, COLOUR. In America, it's OR, right? And he said, no, leave it.
And, you mean the correct way to spell?
yeah, that one, yeah. But there's also ways that the characters speak to each other, especially the friends, the main characters.
Yeah.
They speak a bit like we do, the way we speak English, right? And I was a bit concerned that some things may not get across. And the Patrick is the chap who's the editor on the book. He said to me, no, we leave it, he said, because that's what makes it interesting. It's different. I went, okay, cool.
Was all the art done in the computer?
Yeah, exactly. Well, not all of it. All of the layouts, 50% of the layouts were digital, because that's when I was sitting. That's what Dino would have seen when we were in the studio in Berlin.
Yeah.
But then when we used to go for lunch sometimes, or because we were there so much together, there was often evenings where he'd be sketching and I'd be sketching. We'd go to a restaurant, me, him, and Dean Taylor, and the 3 of us would be drawing, nobody talking, everybody's working on their project. What do you think? But so I blocked out the whole thing half and half. And then I realized that, I should do this digitally because it's fast and I could correct things. But also I had this trick where I used I used a very old Cintiq, a very old Mac, and a very old version of Photoshop that I had lying around. And everything was about to collapse. I was just waiting for it not to work anymore, and I couldn't afford to update anything and all this. So anyway, I started putting white in the black. So I would do these black shapes, and then I would like have white on the brush, and it was almost like doing etching.
Wash resist, kind of almost, yeah.
Yeah, or kind of scraper board,
Yeah.
And what it allowed, it kind of, like, a few people saw it and they wouldn't believe it was digital. They thought it was done with ink, until you can recognize when there's too much detail on a small panel, you can see that it's digital. But If I never said it was digital, I don't think anybody would know.
Knowing that you have a musical background as well, what would you recommend, or what would you see as a pairing band, song, or album for when readers are reading your book?
Oh, what's really funny is Dark Horse have this clever thing, which I would never have thought of, but they make a playlist on Spotify for music that, you know, might be, you could listen to. So I gave them a list of songs that I think could be that playlist. Yeah. That I listened to when I was drawing, you know. I think I don't know, maybe 20 songs. When I'm drawing, when I'm kind of on autopilot and I'm you know, stuck in to the thing, I actually listen to kind of heavy stuff, old hard rock, Black Sabbath and AC/DC and 60s stuff. The Horslips would be an influence because of Barry. Well, I knew them before I knew Barry, but Barry was the writer, co-writer. He was involved. He was in a band in the 70s, which were like a big inspiration to a lot of guys in my age.
What was the creative process like among you, Barry, and Dee?
We were never in the same room as such, right? So only when Barry would come down to where I live, he lives in Dublin, so he would come down here. It's about a 2-hour drive, and you know, we'd hang out, we'd get a bit of lunch, we'd talk about the ideas. I'd show him some of the stuff I was thinking, and he'd go back and write a draft and then send it to me, and then I would change it all and drive him crazy. And then, so we would email it back and forth, but we would get together to talk about mostly, like, we never got into a thing like where you see some people writing plays or comics or films where, what if he said this, and what if he said that, and what if he said the other thing? We weren't doing that. So it was more like that. We would do sections. Well, I had the basic roadmap of the film, of the story, and it was done in beats, I suppose, again. And then Barry started to tell it in flashbacks, and it was good, you know. It was really nice because he was starting in about 2/3 in, and then we would tell the story and then catch up. But I felt for this kind of movie, it might get confusing, so I just went back and told a linear story. But
sorry, was this more for the screenplay?
Yeah. But you see, the thing with the book is based on the screenplay in a way, because what I was from the writing point of view. So when it came to doing the book, I already had it written, you know what I mean? But I realized that about 4 pages, hang on, get this right. 1 page of that screenplay equated to about 4-point-something pages of comics. But there was a lot of scenes we threw out, you know. There was a lot of scenes in the book that are not in the screenplay because we could do more with the book because it's longer, you know. So the book is quite different from the screenplay in some ways, and in some ways it's exactly the same because there's some great scenes. Like Barry had this brilliant scene where him and Cullen and his wife to be, how they met and how they spoke to each other. Which was really nice. And I kept that, and there was lots of other scenes like that. With Dee, it was a bit different because he did the lettering, and he also did, I suppose, the print preparation, which is the technical side. So at that point, Dee was moving into coloring comics. He had worked in advertising for years, and he was wanting to break out of that and go into comics full time. So when I asked him to help me, because I had met him at a comic convention or somewhere, and we got on, he's a good guy, and he offered to help, and we devised a kind of a language of lettering between us, you know. Like when you read the book, you'll notice that the Morrigan, the evil kind of spirit, when she speaks, there's no bubble around her text, you know, and it's all small, lowercase. Everybody else in the normal world speaks with the normal kind of comic thing, but then we had to devise the crashes and the sound effects and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't want to just go and buy off-the-shelf comic fonts, you know. So we had these kind of manuals, I suppose, for how we do that. So I suppose with the comic, in terms of writing, Barry, I would just send him the pages or the rough layouts, and he would have a read, and he might suggest, oh, maybe they could say this a bit different, or don't say it that way, because earlier on we had it saying it this way. But by the time the book came around, Barry wouldn't have been involved that much. And then myself and Dee I would have passed on the artwork to him with a Word document of the text. And then I would flag where I wanted, you know, well, we look, after about 20 pages, we knew the system. It was very easy. So I could just give Dee the whole thing. And then he would have went ahead and prepared it for print. And our logo, I should mention the logo. I was my friend, an old friend of mine called Fran Welsh, who is old college classmate of mine, who's one of the top graphic designers in Ireland, and he came in and helped us with the logo. And
You mean the actual Hound?
The Hound, the way Hound is done. Yeah.
It looks very nice. It looks very nice.
It's brilliant, yeah. And it's Fran's idea, because of the red, black, and white. He suggested having one book black, one white, and one red.
I heard the book is massive. How many pages is the book?
Well, there's 480 story pages.
Wow.
There's a gallery at the back, which I asked some friends of mine, well-known guys and just friends of mine that are working in illustration, to do a drawing for me, their version of their favorite character in the book. Some of them are not, it's not about being well known, they're just drawing people I know and I like their drawings, but they happen to work in illustration and comics. And I think there's one or two, one in animation, Tom Moore from Cartoon Saloon. He wrote a very nice foreword actually for the book, and he did a drawing in there as well. And I think there's a couple of pages of sketches for me. So altogether, including everything in between the covers, 504 pages.
Nice, amazing. Yeah,
it's big. Yeah, it's massive. Yeah. Is
there some cool details or Easter eggs that you can share with us?
There's a lot in there they won't notice if they don't know me. I have to explain. Dino's in there, right? And well, his head is in there.
Yeah.
So what we did when we were doing the Kickstarter, right? We had to raise money during Kickstarter, so we were trying to figure out what would be cool rewards, and we got some amazing rewards, because there's a fella in Australia who makes big life-size weapons, shields and all this kind of stuff, and he offered to make us for book 2. He saw the drawing that's the cover of book 3, and he made that shield. He actually made a life-size shield that we could sell. And another guy, his friend in New York, said he would make the hurley, the weapon, which is the hurling stick. It's like a hockey stick. I don't know if you know what hurling is, but we have a game over here which is like ice hockey but on grass. The game is really important in the Cuchulainn story, and it's a 5,000-year-old game here. Yeah, so the weapon was made, the shield was made, and then somebody said to me, I can't remember who told me, but they said that they had heard about a guy or a person doing a Kickstarter offering to draw. If you wanted to be in the book, you pay this much money, right? So I said, okay, I'll do that. So they're all dotted through the book. You'll see some faces look a bit more real than regular, and then there's a pyramid of heads, and that's all my friends.
There somewhere.
And so I got Dino. The ones on the very top are people who paid to be there. They asked, could they be? Because it was crazy. Nice. We were saying, who wants to have a severed head? It will cost you $200. and people paid for it. It was crazy. And then, but with Dino, I remember asking Dino and a few of the other guys, could you all send me photographs of you dead, like this? And then I would work out roughly what I thought it would work in. And I'm in there, and Barry's in there, and Hugh Welshman and B is in there. So if you look through the book, you'll notice that there's a couple of people who own comic shops here. They're in there. There's the guy who made the shield. He's in there. The fellow who made the weapon. He's in there.
What is next for you and Hound?
Well, for me, I have a new record coming out in April.
What's the name of the album?
Hard Truth. Yeah, it's cool. It's the second one. The first one I did actually in Canada. Working on a third album at the moment.
Are you coming over, Paul, for a book signing?
Oh yeah, well that's the thing, right? I don't know. I'm waiting to hear, because I've just been invited to Dublin Comic Con in March.
Oh, okay.
So I think I'll do that in March, and I really would love to do another Irish mythology.
Yeah.
Book, like a prequel.
Hey, before we continue, I want to ask everyone to please subscribe to the channel, and if you like the content, hit that like button. If you're enjoying this video, thank you so much. Now back to Paul. Where can someone buy or pre-order Hound?
Anywhere books are sold. Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Wow, it's everywhere now.
Everywhere. Bookdepository.com. It's in your local bookshop, your local comic store, whatever. It's everywhere, as far as I know.
That's so
and the more pre-orders we get, I'm being told the better. So please pre-order.
I'll put some links down in the description as well to help everybody find it. Paul, thank you so much for chatting with us. I really look forward to reading the book. Gonna be doing a unboxing here in the channel as soon as I get my hands on one. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Robbie.
Thanks a lot, lads. See ya.
Ciao for now.
Thank you.